Gifts. This morning, we are going to spend a little time looking at one of the stories that Jesus shared that's recorded for us in the book of Luke. And I spent quite a bit of time this week in this text. I nearly broke down weeping in Starbucks one day. As I reread this text, I've heard this story over and over again. But there was something that really grabbed a hold of my heart this week as I looked at this story found in Luke 15. And I want to set a bit of a background before we dig into the passage that I want to look at this morning. So I'm going to read just the first couple of verses of Luke 15 to kind of set the tone. So the tax collectors and sinners were gathered around to hear Jesus. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." Sometimes I find it a little helpful to read a passage from a different translation than I'm used to reading. And this is one that kind of grabbed a hold of me this week. It's from The Voice. It says, "Jesus became increasingly popular among notorious sinners, tax collectors, and other social outcasts. The Pharisees and religious scholars noticed this, and they said, 'This man welcomes immoral people and enjoys their company over a meal.'" So this is the scene. Jesus is gathered around this table. There are rather unsavory characters that are sitting around the table with him. The Pharisees, the religious elite of the day, the teachers of the law, those people who were the holders of the truth, began muttering about this behavior. They were a little concerned that this young rabbi was walking down a path that was not set out by the teachers before him. It was rather unbecoming for him to be hanging around with this kind of rabble. How could he defile himself by breaking bread in that sort of company? So Jesus overhears these mutterings, and he shares 3 short stories. And you'll be familiar with all 3 of them, I'm sure. He talks about sheep in the first story, having 99. If you had 100 sheep and one of them went missing, you would leave the 99 and you would go after the one. The second one was about a coin of incredible worth. And the third one, the one that we're going to focus on, is a story about a son. Or rather, a story about a couple of sons. Now, this is where we're going to spend some of our time this morning, and I was really tempted to play Keith Green's Prodigal Son Suite as our reading for this morning. If you haven't heard Keith Green's Prodigal Son Suite, you need to go home, you need to YouTube it, and you need to sit down for 12 minutes, because it is a little over 12 minutes long, and you need to listen to Keith tell this story, because Keith breathes kind of fresh life into a story that you've maybe heard before, and he plays a mean piano. But as a second option, allow me to read for you this morning. Jesus continues, "There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, 'Father, give me my share of the estate.' So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, 'How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants.' So he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' So they began to celebrate. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked him what was going on. "Your brother has come," he replied, "and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound." The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, "Look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. You never even gave me so much as a young goat so that I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him." "My son," the father said, "you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." Luke 15:11-32. God, this story is so powerful. I wish I could have been there the first time Jesus shared it in the company of tax collectors and sinners and Pharisees. When I read these words, I'm challenged by not only the prodigal, but the elder son. I'm challenged by what I see in this incredible father. Help me now as we dig into this word to unpackage some of this. I pray that your Spirit would speak to each one of our hearts, that we would experience the grace of this Father, that we would recognize ourselves in this story, and that we would leave this place having been found. We pray through Christ our Lord. Amen. What a story. I love the parables of Jesus. I love the way Jesus chooses to communicate with people. You need to remember that he's responding to a complaint of the religious elite. They're muttering that he's eating with tax collectors and sinners, and he's sitting around a table, and this is the stuff he comes up with. Absolutely brilliant. If I had only 1 minute to explain all I could, all that I know about God, if I was asked by someone why I'm a Christian, I was asked to describe this Father, this God that I believe in, I might be tempted to respond with this story and this story alone. This wraps up so much of what the gospel means to me. I'm not sure that there are any other stories that reveal so much of the heart of God and evoke so much emotion in a tiny little tale. Nor is there a story that I see myself so clearly in. Let's begin by looking at this younger son. The story begins with a man who has 2 sons. And the younger comes to the father and says, "Father, give me my share of the estate." So the father divided his property between the 2 sons. Now, this at first reading might not seem like that big of a deal. But if any of you have kids, or any of you are getting to the age where you're starting to figure out what's going into your will and who's going to be getting what after you pass on, could you imagine one of your children walking up to you and saying, "You know what? I don't really want to wait until you're dead. Could you just give me my stuff now?" You might feel a little offended. You might wonder what has come over your child that they feel that this is an okay request to make. But in the time of Jesus, this would have been far more offensive. Remember, this is the younger son. In Jesus' day, it was the eldest son who was the one who was going to receive the birthright. He was the one who was going to get the bulk of the estate. He was the one who was going to receive more of the blessing from the father. He would actually get 2/3 of everything the father owned would go to the eldest son. So the youngest is asking for his little portion. So he's not only speaking out of turn, he's really disrespecting his father. And remember who's listening to this story. The religious leaders would have heard this right away. They're like, wait, it says honor your father and mother. This young man is not honoring his father. Like before murder and adultery, honor your father and mother is in the list. But this young son asks his father for his share of the estate. He is effectively saying, I don't want to wait around for you to die. So can I have the money now? That would not have been an easy thing for a father to hear. Essentially, I wish you were dead already. Heartless, possibly, gutsy request. I'm not sure which. But Jesus would have had the attention of those religious leaders from the opening sentence of his story. This is truly a kid who is wayward. The younger son asks for his share of the estate. This is absolutely scandalous. But here's the crazy thing. The father does it. He should have been beaten. He should have been strung up. He should have been tossed out of the house. You would not stand for that kind of behavior from your son. But this father grants his younger son's request. He splits up the share of the estate and hands it over to his younger son. We're going to get to the father in a minute. But this younger son takes off. Scripture says that not long after, he got together all that he had and he set off for a distant country and there squandered his wealth in wild living. So it's not like he moved down the block. It's not like he went to the next farmyard over and started his own business and just kind of wanted to do things a little bit differently. He completely rejects his family. It says he goes to a distant country, to a far off land, far from the rules of his father, probably far even from the faith of his father. If it wasn't bad enough that he wished his dad was dead, he further rejects his father and says, I don't want anything to do with you, and I'm going to get as far away from you as possible. And there he begins to squander this incredible gift of his father on wild living. I want to look at this younger son for a second. He's brash. He's impulsive. He is maybe sick of being on the farm. Maybe he wants to see the world. Maybe he wants to experience all the things that he figures his father has been either protecting him from or, holding him back from participating in. Every time I read this story, I see myself in that younger son. There was a period in my life where I wanted nothing to do with God, nothing to do with the faith of my mother and the rules of her house. I couldn't wait to move out and go my own way. I was just talking this last week. I grew up in Carmen, not far from here. I was just talking with a friend of mine who said, yeah, I just drove through Carmen. What a lovely little town. I'm like, yeah, it's a great town to raise kids in and retire in, but it's not a great town to grow up in. From my perspective as a kid, I couldn't wait to go to the big city. I couldn't wait to just get out and spread my wings. Now I kind of wish I was raising my kids in Carmen and not in the big city. But I've walked that path of rebellion. I've dealt with that angst and that feeling of I got to get out of here. I see myself so clearly in the younger son. And maybe some of you can too. Maybe you're in that stage of life right now. You don't even have to be the younger teenage kid to be experiencing that. Periods of your life where you've kind of collected your things and decided, you know what? I'm just going to do things my own way. I'm going to maybe step outside of where God's been leading me in the past and I'm going to head off for a distant country. Maybe you're going to decide to just spend your time on yourself or your own stuff. It would be very easy for the teachers of the law to see a bunch of younger sons sitting around the table with Jesus. When Jesus started talking, they would have been like, yep, that tax collector, he's one of the younger sons. And that prostitute, definitely one of the younger daughters. These misfits, these lawbreakers, surely this is who Jesus was talking about, and nobody wants to be like the younger son. Perhaps you would say that yourself this morning. I see myself in the younger son, but I don't want to be that younger son. I would guess that most of us at one time or another have decided to walk away from the home of our Father. We've decided to strike out on our own and I know what's best for me kind of attitude. And chances are we came to a place where we realized that we were far from home. And it wasn't a place we wanted to spend the rest of our lives in. Because the story continues. Eventually it all dries up. The money, figuratively and literally in this case. There's a famine in the land. He's squandered everything that he has. He's left for broke. And he has to figure out a way to survive far from home. Now, Jesus is talking to religious leaders, so he's got their attention with this son who has disrespected his father, and now he's discarded the ways of Jehovah, and he's off in a distant land, living in a foreign place, And so what does he do? Does he come to his senses and come back? No. He decides he is going to become a hired hand for someone in a foreign country. He was going to work for a foreigner, further disgracing himself and his family in the eyes of the religious elite. They're listening to Jesus weave this yarn, and I can just see them like, yes, this is exactly, you're pointing out exactly what these people are. He goes a step farther to say that he was working with pigs, perhaps the most unclean animal you can imagine, that he longed to eat alongside of them. I can just picture the religious elite just getting puffed up and like, yes, this is exactly what's going on here. But then the story turns. It says, when he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have food to spare? And here I am starving to death. I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. So he got up and went to his father. I will return home, he says, but not as a son, but as a slave. No longer worthy. I've burned that bridge. I'm not going to be able to step back into my father's arms. I see myself in this moment in the younger son as well. Feeling completely unworthy of a father's love. Recognizing that I had squandered so much, that I had offended his holy laws, that I had done too much, that I was too far to be reached by his grace. I can imagine the younger son saying, okay, I'm going to go back. And he starts rehearsing his speech as he's walking in sandals that are totally worn out. This painting that was up here was Rembrandt's painting of the Return of the Prodigal Son. And if you look at the painting, his head is shaved. Whether that's because he had bugs in it or just was an actual slave. I'm not sure what Rembrandt was trying to get at. But if you look at his feet, he has one sandal that's barely hanging on and the other one is just totally bare. He is basically in his undergarments. He is ragged and he has nothing left. I can picture him walking down the road, making his way back home, rehearsing his speech. Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy. Maybe you've been there when you've thought about what it would be like to come back to God, when you've realized that you have done something that has offended his laws, where you feel like I've maybe gone too far. I'm no longer worthy. You confess that you've sinned against heaven. You've sinned against him. Now, the religious leaders would have been eating this up until Jesus drops. But you think this is the way of the world. You think this is the way it works. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him, had compassion on him, and he ran. God doesn't run. Men don't run. You come to us, right? God ran. The Father ran. Now, what this little twist in the story would have totally dropped the bottom out for the religious elite. Because this story would seem to say that the father was sitting on the porch waiting for his son to come home. That the father was expecting that one day this boy of mine is going to come to his senses. He's going to realize he's going to come back. And when he comes back, I'm going to have open arms. The religious elite would have suggested that once the son had so disobeyed and so disrespected, he would have been cut off. He would have been given his portion of the estate. See you later. You are no longer a son of mine. But while he was still a long way off, a father saw him, was filled with compassion for him, and ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. I think this is the only time in Scripture we see the Father, God, running. An undignified act, throwing his arms around and kissing a filthy, broken down boy. Wretched, emaciated version of his son. The story doesn't tell us how long his son was gone for. But this son had done the ultimate in insulting his father by asking for the inheritance and then recklessly loses it all in wild living. This son has some serious explaining to do. So the son starts to spit out his speech that I imagine he's been practicing for the last 20 miles, and he can't even get it out. Dad's already barking orders about starting up a party, bringing a robe and a ring. The father says to the servants, quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. A sign of being a part of his family. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bringing back the authority that he would have as a son of the father. And then bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. So they began to celebrate. He throws a party. Now, I remember as a kid making some mistakes and having to go and talk to my dad or apologize or confess that we had done something wrong. I remember at one time we were playing baseball in the front yard with a tennis ball, and we happened to put it through one of the windows above the door. And I remember being terrified. It was a tennis ball in a window. I didn't squander all of my wealth on wild living. But they didn't throw a party for me after I cracked the window. What's the deal with this father? There was no, okay, what have you been up to? Well, where's the money? What have you been doing? I've heard rumors that possibly you were hooking up with prostitutes and maybe gambling it all away. What's the deal? Nope. Royal robes. Rings on his fingers, brand new sandals, and kills the fatted calf. I think this is the moment in the story where most of us, and I'm sure the Pharisees, lost the plot. Bottom drops out. This doesn't make any sense. Your story was going great until right here. We're going to look at the crazy father in a couple of seconds. Because Jesus carries on with the story. He says, meanwhile, the older son was in the field, and when he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked him, what's going on? Your brother has come, he's replied. Your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound. And the older brother became so angry that he refused to go in. So the father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, look, all these years I've been slaving for you. I never disobeyed your orders. You never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours who has squandered your property with prostitutes comes home, you kill the fatted calf for him. This is the right reaction to what the younger son had done, isn't it? This would be my first reaction. When I look at the recklessness of this younger son, how he disrespected his dad. He wasted all your hard-earned money on prostitutes and you throw a party? So when I was younger, I saw myself in the life of the younger son. But oh man, do I see myself in the elder sometimes today. When I see other people experiencing blessing or favor, when I see them being successful, when I see their prayers being answered, there's a twinge in me that's like, what's wrong with me? I've been faithful. I'm busting my butt out here planting a church for you, and they're getting everything just handed to them. It's not fair. The cry of the eldest son, it's not fair. I never once broke the rules. It's not fair. This son of yours, he says, not my brother, not your son, not one of the members of our family, this son of yours. Do you see the distance he feels in that moment? He doesn't feel loved by his dad. He really doesn't want anything to do with his younger brother. With his words, he pushes himself away from everybody. This son of yours, I've been faithful. I've been true. It's not fair. Now, I'm not sure if the Pharisees caught that Jesus might be kind of directing this part of the story at them. But boy, do I see myself in the elder son. When I see people who are forgiven of much, I wish that there's got to be some restitution. They ripped these people off. They got to pay that all back. It's not the way of the Father. I don't know where you see yourself in this story, or if you see yourself in this story. I see moments where I emulate that younger son, where I'm just kind of wasting my life and my talent and my ability, where I chase after things that don't really matter. The other day I was thinking about how many movie lines I could quote. I have lyrics to songs that nobody should have stuck in their head, ever. 1980s, like I can go through so many tunes. But could I quote the same amount of scripture? I've been engulfed in the things of this world for so long. Am I chasing after? Am I just wasting this inheritance that has been given to me? I don't know if you see yourself in the younger son or more in the elder, resentful of the grace and mercy that your father has shown to this miscreant that your younger brother has become. I love the painting that Rembrandt has here. If you look at the painting, the gentleman standing, still wearing the robes and the hat with his arms folded, stepping back and standing above is the elder brother, looking down both at his father and younger brother. The truth of the story is we will probably identify at different points in our life with each one of these sons, but we're not called to be like either one of them. It's a bit of a misnomer to call this the story of the prodigal son, because the real central character is the father. The real one that you need to catch the heart of, the real one that you need to focus on, is the father in this story. Remember the reason why Jesus is telling this tale. He's been accused of hanging out with all of the wrong people. But the father accepts both brothers. Jesus is saying that not only are the people around this table important, but so are the Pharisees, the ones who are grumbling. It's interesting that God goes out of his way to reach both brothers. While the younger son was on his way back, and so while he was still a long way off, the father ran out to him, wrapped his arms around him, and kissed him. And while the younger son was maybe sitting on the porch or just outside grumbling about this party that was happening, the father left the party and came out for the older son. And he said, "My son, all I have is yours." There was no trying to make the elder son feel bad for the way that he had been acting. There was no reprimand for this outburst. There was only love. There was an acceptance and a reaching out for both of them. His love is not reserved for one more than the other. And too often, I think we paint God with the same brush as the elder brother. We think that our father is this one that we have to, if we just follow all of the right rules and if we color within the lines, if we stay inside the fence, that he's going to love us. And he's going to, maybe every once in a while, he's going to give us a young goat so that we can have a good time with our friends. We feel like if we're obedient, if we tough it out, then maybe he's going to love us. But then we look up and we see that our father has got his gaze on the horizon and he's looking for this younger son. And when the son comes home, there's no, "Why can't you be more like your older brother?" There's no, "I told you this was a bad idea," or "You better never do this again." The response of the father is only hugs, kisses, and parties. This is a love that I don't quite understand. But it's not a love that's only reserved for the younger son, because the loyal, obedient son was invited in to the party as well and was reminded that all he has belongs to the younger son. This was a true statement. The younger son had lost all of his inheritance. He had spent it all. Everything now that the father owned belonged to the eldest son. This is why I believe in Jesus. This story reveals to me the God that Jesus came to reveal. He said, if you want to see the Father, you need to look to me. And this is who the Father is. He is one who breaks bread with sinners, but who also welcomes in those who are obedient and wanting to follow him. He's a Father who runs to us, who loves us, who welcomes us home, whether we've been beat down, broken, worn out from a life squandered in a distant land, or whether we've played by all the right rules and secretly felt like we've maybe been missing out and haven't been treated fairly. See, today the Father loves you, whether you see yourself in the elder son or the younger. He loves you just as you are, not as you should be. Because none of us here are as we should be. That's Brennan Manning. It's one of my favorite things he would say almost every time he preaches, but he had this gravelly voice and he'd say, the Father loves you just as you are, not as you should be, because none of us are as we should be. This is the gospel. This is the good news. This story of the prodigal son, the story of the forgiving father, this is my story. I see myself in the younger and elder son. And chances are it's your story as well. Where do you see yourself in this scripture? Do you realize that God is wanting to welcome you home? Whether you're in a distant land or just sitting on the step outside. My son, the Father says, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. The truth for us to remember this morning is we have all been lost. But I wonder today how many of us will choose to be found. Let's pray. Jesus, you were such a gifted storyteller, and there's no way I will have been able to do justice to this incredible tale that you told in the context that you told it in. I wish I could have seen the look on the faces of the people sitting around the table as you just went on and on about this younger son and how horrible he was and how far from the father he had become. And watched the Pharisees as they started wringing their hands and realizing that they were the chosen ones and God was going to deal with these reckless ones who had wandered away. And then you flipped the tables. You said, but while the younger was a long way off, the father saw him and he ran to him. I know that there are moments in my life where I have felt far from you, where I have maybe even been far from you. And the knowledge that you were looking for me, that you were waiting for me to come to my senses, to return home, that is almost too wonderful to bear. To know that when I rehearsed my speeches, when I realized that the path that I was on was not going to bring me life, but was going to lead me to death, I came to my senses and started thinking about how I was going to explain myself to Almighty God that I had once again wandered away. To know that your response was going to be open arms, a hug, a welcome back into the family, and a party being thrown. You are a father that I find very difficult to understand because I want to react the same way that the elder son does, even when it's my own life. I got some explaining to do. I better have some penance to pay, or I'm going to have to pay some restitution for not having been obedient. And yet, you reach out, you forgive. You forgive both. I'm so thankful that this is not just a lesson for those of us who have squandered our lives in wild living. Jesus, you brought about such an opportunity for everybody in that room and everybody in this room to be found in the arms of a Father who forgives, who loves us just as we are, not as we should be, and who invites us in back home. So Lord, my prayer today is wherever we find ourselves, whether we find ourselves far from you, off doing our own thing, not really having any use for the Father or his ways, pray, God, that today some of us would come to our senses. We would realize that this is not leading us to life, that while it may seem fun in the moment, it is ultimately destroying us. That we would come to our senses and we would make our way back home. Lord, I know that you will welcome each one of us. Or whether we find ourselves being more like the elder son, where we've been faithful, we've been doing our best to honor you with everything that we say and do, but sometimes we feel a little slighted. Sometimes we feel like maybe you haven't been caring for us the way that you seem to care for those who've squandered so much. Help us to realize that you come and sit on the porch with us as well. You put your arm around us and you say, hey, everything that I have is yours. You are with me and will always be with me. Come and celebrate. Each one of us has been lost. God, I pray that today we would all be found. We would be found in your presence, welcomed back into your home. That we would experience this extravagant, crazy grace and love that the Father reveals to us. Thank you for this story. I pray that it would stir our hearts through the rest of this week. I pray that we would see people in our lives where we have the opportunity to be the Father to them. Someone who extends grace and love and welcome. Whether we see ourselves in the younger or the elder, Lord, I pray that you would help us to become more like you, Father. For we ask this in your name, Jesus. Amen. Amen.
Thank you, Scott. This morning, before we are dismissed, I just want to give you opportunity of, if you identified with one or the other, or just need to just be embraced by the Father's love, and just hear those words of how much he loves you. I want, if you have business with God, please do not rush out. This is what church is here for. So as we dismiss, I'm just going to close with this reading. As Paul understood this message today, and he says, for this reason I kneel before the Father, from whom every family in heaven and earth derives its name. And I pray that out of his glorious riches he may strengthen you, Grace Community, with power through his Spirit in your inner being, so that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith. And I pray that you, being rooted and established in love, may have power, together with all the Lord's holy people, to grasp how wide and how long and how high and deep is the love of Christ. May God bless you as you go, but do not rush away. If you want to visit, just visit in the foyer, but they're just going to put some music on. Just take some time to spend with the Father this morning in Jesus' name. God bless you.